Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video. I'm going to be talking or trying to answer the question of why we are or why are we so alone. I think this is something that many of us experience nowadays in society, especially in 2026, because many people will often say it's because of technology, it's because of the advancements that have been made. And it's interesting because advancements in science and technology are supposed to actually make us improve our lives, right? And paradoxically or ironically, they do improve certain aspects of our lives. I would say more having to do with hard labor or like practical aspects. No, like think about back in the day, you used to have to go out and have to get your own food, your own pizza, whatever. Now you can just order it from an app, right? Um, I mean, you could also call like maybe 20 years ago, you could call and order a pizza, but before we even had a phone, you actually had to go out and get your own stuff. Now you can just have everything basically delivered to your house. So if you have the money, like let's say you work from home, kind of like pandemic style, um, there's no need for you to go out anymore, right? So going out and staying in, I think that's the first difference we have in the why are we alone answer. Because if you think about it, when you go out, you need to, well, oftentimes interact with people, right? From the person at the restaurant, behind the restaurant counter, to the person on the bus, to a person, I don't know, on the street, whatever. Like you, at least you see people and other people see you, right? And if you're in your own house, if you're in your own room, like all day, every day, um, that can make you feel pretty alone. Now, let's assume that you're living alone, or at least you don't have that many people in your house, right? Like, let's say it's just you and maybe like another two or three relatives, right? And maybe they're not even at the house. So this kind of takes us to the meaning of connection, because the opposite of being alone or feeling lonely, I mean, this points to alone in terms of like you're alone, right? And I know a lot of people will say, well, you can be surrounded by people so you're not alone but still feel lonely, right? But I would say, man, that's like, tomatoes, tomatoes. Like if you feel lonely, you're alone. It doesn't matter if you have people around you, right? Like you're alone. Like because I'm looking at it from a more psychological, emotional perspective, right? And the opposite of that would be to have connections, right? To make bonds with people, to I don't know, like talk and maybe dialogue with them, or yeah, like just chat about stuff, right? Seeing as how another person can care about what's going on in your life and vice versa. You care about what's going on in another person's life, and maybe you guys are asking each other questions. You're engaged in a conversation, and that can be pretty healthy, right? Um, I feel like there are extremists. What I mean by extremists are like people that wanna be themselves too much and will not conform to society's norms. And that can also propel a lot of this loneliness, because then it's like, hey, you know what? I don't only want to talk about what's going on in your life, what's going on in my life. Like, I want us to be together like all the time and talk about conspiracy theories or just joke around all day really intensely. Like, and that's where a lot of people will draw the line and will be like, no. So that can actually push you back into loneliness, right? But I'll get to that point eventually. I'm going to touch on that. So the first argument I wanted to make is that you don't feel it, you are alone, right? And this idea of like, because we can take it to that extreme, like I said, like you can say, well, there are people, you know outside. I have friends, I have family or whatever, but it's like they're not even there, right? And I can argue I can even I feel like I feel like I can even investigate or like do an experiment with people where I can literally measure the time and the proximity, right? Like how far are you from people? How close are you from people during a day? And I can come up with some statistics to show you that you are physically alone, that you aren't that close to people that long in a day, right? That you're not like within meters or feet or inches or whatever, that you're far from people, and that you also don't spend as much time with people, right? So that's provoking this alone sensation, right? So it's not only emotional, like I'm lonely, of course, and that's a whole nother thing. But the video is called Why Are We Alone? Right? And alone has to do with physical, with that physical element, which to me is very real. You don't only feel like you're alone, you are alone, right? There aren't that many people around you for that long of a time. So we're talking about space and time there. So we can think back maybe like 20, 30, 40 years ago when people were actually closer for longer time, or for longer periods of time. Nowadays, we have people that, sure, they get together, but it's very limiting, right? It's like we'll get together for like 1 or 2 hours and then I gotta go. I got other stuff to do, right? So it's like you're not even around people that much for that long, right? Again, so I say, look around you, right? Again, you don't feel it, you are alone. Look around you, even though we are connected. And this is the part that's very ironic because we can say, well, we're just a click away. I'm a message away, I'm a call away, I'm a text message away. Yeah, but it's limiting because if I'm like, let's say I send you a text message and I'm like, hey, I want to see you today. I want to talk to you today. Sure, you can meet up with me. You may not even be able to meet up with me today. You may push it till tomorrow or whatever. But then what if I call you back the next day? Hey, I need to see you again. And then the next day, and then the next day, right? Eventually you're going to be like, hey, you know what? Like, I love being around you. I can talk to you, but I got other stuff to do. So I can't be seeing you every day, right? And that person will eventually like draw the line. And that's what I'm referring to. Um, so this is a fantasy that we're living in. And you can ask yourself, like, what's going on? Why are people doing this, right? Well, I have an answer which connects kind of to this idea that we're eventually going to get to, which is the individuality aspect of it, or more in terms of the differentiation aspect of it, which basically means that people are only concerned about themselves and about things they like, right? So I can be talking to you, sure, but hey, you know what? I got to go because now I have a guitar class and I like guitar. I want to learn guitar. Or I have a French class. Or I need to get home so I can watch the latest episode of whatever. Or I need to do my homework. Or I need to do this report for work. So we're kind of like so involved, so self involved that this makes us not have time for other people, literally, right? That's what's going on essentially, right? So even though we are connected, and I kind of felt like with the invention of the phone and the internet, maybe those people that put it out there knew what would happen, or as time progressed, they started to see the changes, and they were like, hey, you know what, people are going to start to feel pretty um like distant, right? Like both physically and in time, right? Spend less time together, be less proximal to each other, or less close, farther away from each other or from one another. um, let's come up with this propaganda campaign, this myth that now we're connected, right? Like, so even though you don't see your friends because you're off doing 1,000 other things, you're still connected, right? Like they're just a click away, a call away, a text message away, and you can even like FaceTime them or whatever, right? But again, that's irrelevant because you're not doing any of that stuff, right? And even if you did, again, it's limited. So even if you're like, okay, I'm gonna answer this text message, it's like I don't have time right now to read, to understand it, to think about what I'm gonna say, to type it up, to send it, right? Like I'll just put it off for later. And that's what's happening. That's why people will take long to answer your messages, right? uh, and again, I'm talking about connection. I'm not talking about like, hey, did you finish the report? No. Or did you do your homework? No. Like, I'm talking about like, hey, how's your day? Like this type of, which is even worse because that type of talk isn't really that common anymore, right? People aren't just talking to talk. Like, it's like, no, like, I got stuff to do again. I gotta go, right? So that's the thing. As time goes by, individual differences are becoming more marked and noticeable. I spoke, or I touched on this point when I spoke about private and public life, and how your private life is really weird. You're a really weird person, right? And we can even say that before, like many years ago, people weren't as private because essentially there wasn't that much privacy. Think about tribes or clans or community groups, right? Where it's like you share everything, you're around people all the time. So you really don't have privacy. And if you don't have privacy, you don't have time to reflect, you don't have time to think, and you don't have time to be yourself, right? So privacy fundamentally makes you different, makes you unique, right? And I touched on that topic about uniqueness, and how society basically doesn't like uniqueness because society likes public, right? Public means what everybody has been doing and needs to keep on doing. So whenever you come out with something private, it's going to get rejected because nobody's going to like it. And then I touched on the few that are accepted for their uniqueness and how those people become talented and then celebrated and become celebrities, right? That's why they're called celebrities, because they're celebrated for what makes them unique, for what they develop privately, right? But it's really hard because people have to like that, right? So it's like you can say I'm myself, sure, but nobody cares and nobody likes it and nobody's gonna pay to see it. But then other people, will be like, hey, I got this talent or I'm good at this thing. And a lot of people start to like it. So then I blow up, I become famous, and I get paid for being unique, right? Which is awesome. I think it's one of the best things that you can experience in life, which I feel like I'm not getting to do that, right? Like I probably won't get to do that in my life because what makes me unique isn't liked by other people. Well, anyway, I touched on that topic, but see, what makes you unique, sure, it's uniqueness, it's originality, it's different than the norm, but you can't show too much of that in the public life with others, with society. And that's kind of like the other side of the coin, right? Which is actually not the other side of the coin. If you think about it, it's the same thing. Because again, you're going to say, well, what makes me unique are all these five things, right? I like cooking, I like blah, blah, I like this and this and this, I like sports, whatever. I'm a amalgamany, or I don't know how they say, I don't know how they say, I'm like a weird kaleidoscope of things, right? And everybody's different. That's true. And when you're different, again, inevitably you isolate yourself because not everybody likes what you like. So then you got to go out and find other people who like what you do. So then you'll end up having like five different groups of friends, five different classes, or five different projects, or five different whatever, right? Like you're just so that to a certain extent ends up, see, because you'll have friends, you'll have relationships, but they won't be deep. They won't be meaningful. You won't create bonds. They'll be superficial. And the only thing that will tie you to those people is that one hobby, is that one thing in common. Because other than that, you don't have other things in common. And worse than that, other than that, you don't even have the same type of vibe, chemistry, personality, right? Which to me is even more important than having things you like. You can have two people that like completely different things but are best friends because their personalities are very similar, or because they just get each other, right? Because they just like being around each other. They just click, right? Now imagine if you get a group of that going, like that's awesome, right? That's, I think, another thing that you try to do in life, like find people who you can really relate to and connect with, because they'll say like family's supposed to do that, but it's like, yeah, no, family's family, right? So it's like they're there, you support each other, you love each other, whatever, but maybe there aren't like those type of deep bond connections that you eventually find with other people, right? And that's kind of hard. That's kind of hard to find and keep. Hard to find because for obvious reasons, right? If you don't get out there, if you're not socializing as much, if you find yourself lonely, it's hard enough. But to keep, because people will change. That's something else I wanted to touch on maybe later on. How do tastes change? Do preferences, do likes change? Right? How do they change? Why do they change? So all of like, and even your personality will change with time, right? So someone who was your best friend 10 years ago might not be your best friend now because not only did you change, but that other person changed, and it's just now like not the same, right? So these individual differences are what's keeping us apart to a certain extent. Like I mentioned, we're all off doing whatever we're doing, and we don't have time to waste because it will literally feel nowadays like we're wasting time listening or talking to someone about something that's not going to bring me value or bring me something worthwhile, right? Like we're just out there trying to not only make ends meet and survive, but also trying to become a better version of ourselves, learn more, grow. It's like we're always in competition with others, with ourselves. It's the same crap, right? It's making us hyper productive, hyper anxious, and then you come around with this other problem, which is like, now I'm lonely too. Like I feel alone. I'm alone. It's like, well, everybody is, because again, everybody's doing the same thing, right? So it's like a social sickness to a certain extent. So anyway, that's that like explanation. That's the reason, and the effect it's having on people is ultimately to feel alone, right? Like to even be with other people and not being able to connect, which is crazy, right? Because you're like, okay, we're all in this together, we're all here right now at a party, at some event, and it's like everyone's on their phone, we can't even talk, we can't even socialize friend, like, with a friendly extension, without being nervous, without getting like anxious, without being like suspicious of other people, like, because there's no trust, by the way, right? Like I explained, I saw in a video a while back that trust is going to become like the least, the like one of the resources or one of the things that is going to be, there's not going to be that much trust anymore in society because of the information. There's so much information and it begins there that you don't know who to believe, right? And you don't know what people want. So a question here or something that can come up, you can say, is how well. This is kind of weird because it's like you're trying to reach a balance between the two phenomena or the two different types of things that are going on, right? One of them is trying to be public and fit in with a society that's, by the way, individualistic, which again, there's nothing wrong with being individualistic. Everybody needs their me time, right? But you also don't know now how to integrate yourself with other people, how to socialize, how to share, how to connect, right? How to listen, right? How to express yourself. So that's becoming a big issue, a big problem, especially with the younger generations. Um, and yeah, so it's this back and forth between public life, right, and your private life, but you also want to be yourself, right? You also want to stand out to a certain extent. You want to be original, right? So how can you stand out but stand in at the same time? Is the question here. Um, where you're not too far from the crowd, but you're original enough, right? That becomes like an issue because again, society is not giving you nowadays a lot of opportunities to connect with other people because again, it's not, and you can say, well, it's manipulation, it's psychological manipulation, sure, or maybe it's just naturally the times, right? Because even the people that have done the manipulating are being manipulated, so everybody's the same, right? It's like there's no aliens, there's no robots controlling everything that's being done to humans. Like we're doing this ourselves, right? I think about like like rich people, like that control the world, and how they're out there also trying to make ends meet, or trying to make more money, or trying, or worrying about stuff, at least going to the bathroom, having to sleep, having problems, getting sick, like everyone's doing the same thing, right? So you're like, oh, the cell phone was invented to control us. And it's like, sure, but cell phones are now controlling the richest, those people that put the cell phone in the first place to control humanity. Their kids are now being controlled by the cell phone, which they put there to control humanity in the first place. Like there's no escaping it, is what I'm saying. So I don't think, it's fair to say that, we're being manipulated, because all of this is being generated by us. So anyway, how do you make it so you're able to stand out but stand in at the same time? You got to pay a price. See, this is where it gets interesting, because this is kind of like the difference between that which is social and that which is individual, right? And there's an interesting thing which Edward Bernays brings up, which is, he doesn't say it like this, but I thought of it like this. Like, that which is social, how much of that which is social is actually individual, right? Because people are individuals, and society, the social spectrum of society, is built off individuals, like just people like you and me, one person, two people, three people, right? And you get the social element of society. Um, but how much of those norms, social etiquette, customs, tradition, culture, how much of all that crap is actually individual? And you can, we can get into a hot debate about that, but I want to propose that actually it's all individual, because you would be subordinating certain freedoms, of course. You're not allowed to do this or that because you need to stand here and wait in line. You need to do things that you don't want to do. You need to sacrifice certain aspects of your individuality for other individuals, sure. But then you're able to go home, right? Lock your door and relax. And that's very individual, so you may, the social element of life may even be viewed as some type of payoff to be better as an individual, because what would be the payoff if you're truly only living for other people, and you're never, you would just become sacrificial. You would just become like a big empath, like a mom, like the archetypal mom that's just sacrificing for others and getting nothing in return. So in society, or as a social species, we get things in return for the sacrifices we have to make to cut off our private, like, individuality, our difference, what makes us different, right? All of these things. um so this balance of like, okay, well, I'm either standing out and I'm happy. I can express my private life, and work on that and think and reflect. Um, but I'm alone. Or I can stand in, be fake, withhold my individuality or my private expressions, be like the rest, be an NPC, be a copy, but I'm not alone, you know? And again, it's like, what's the balance between that? Because I think both extremes would be bad. You don't want to be out, but you don't want to be in. You don't want to be all the way out, and you don't want to be all the way in. In fact, I think the optimal position would be to be in, but when you're in, be out, right? Which again, that's a celebrity, right? You are accepted by everybody for what makes you different, but that's really hard. So the best thing would be to find people where you can be a little bit of yourself, right? But with limits, again, because you got to recognize where the limits are. You can't just go ahead and be like full blown yourself. Like, you need to put a limit on yourself, right? That's the sacrificial element in order for you to be allowed to stay in, right? But at the same time, you can have your own uniqueness, in different groups or with a group, right? I think that the thing is that you're not going to get exactly what you want, right? You're not going to be able to feel 100% lonely free. I think that's impossible. But I think what will happen is that you'll feel less lonely. You'll connect a little more, right? And you'll be able to be a little bit of yourself in social settings, right? Um, Again, if you want to be full blown yourself, you're going to get rejected unless you're really, unless it doesn't even have to do with whether you're good or bad. You can be very good at something, but if people just don't like it, you're not going anywhere with that, right? Whether it's a talent, whether it's like whatever, right? So, reaching other people is unfulfilling long term. The solution is to accept it to a certain extent. That's kind of like a cold way of looking at it. That was the answer I had written for this video, but I think it's more in terms of like some balance. And I think part of that is right, excuse me, which is the accepting it part. Like accepting that you're not going to be able to fill yourself 100%, but you'll be able to at least get to 50%, right? Which is way different than feeling 0% full, right? And being completely lonely. So you're not going to be completely fulfilled. You're not going to be completely connected to everybody and to everyone and loved for your individuality, right? At 100%. But you'll be at 50, which is like you'll have, more or less solid relationships, solid friendships, solid social circles where you can do certain things, and you'll know you'll be going to those social circles for certain and specific things and not everything, because again, you're a kaleidoscope of things. So it's like, let's say you join a car club and you also like to work out and you also like to play guitar. But at the car club, you're talking about playing guitar. And those people don't like playing guitar, right? Those people, again, have other likes which you don't care about, so it's like just keep it to car club talk. If you're at guitar lessons with other people, well, you can talk about guitar there, right? So it's kind of like you need to, what do they call it? Freelance, I guess. You need to subcontract your different needs to different spaces, right? And there may even be needs that won't be able to be satisfied in other places, right? Maybe only with your family. Like, what if you need to talk about something really emotional, really heavy? Maybe just with a really close friend who's like there to listen to you, not there for that, but there to listen to you, or someone who's really trustworthy, someone who you can do that with, right? Basically, which is typically family. If you ask them, like, hey, can I just like vent? Can I just talk about my emotions for like a couple hours with you? When do you have time for that, right? So I think those are ways to start feeling less lonely, because again, we are living in times where I don't think technology per se, well, yeah, it's technology, but not like cell phone, like just everything, like we have more means to do more things, more ways of doing more things. So if like before you were limited by technology, right? Nowadays, on your cell phone, you can record a video. You have a camera. You have like a recording device. You have a microphone. You have a picture taker. You can do so many things. You can learn languages. And a lot of people are doing that. They're trying to develop themselves. So I think that's where the problem is. It's not like technology is just simply making us. A lot of people are doing that too. They're just using technology to distract themselves, to be entertained, to watch TikTok videos all day or whatever, shorts or reels or whatever, and waste their time or play video games. But even when you're playing video games, you're sometimes like connecting with other people. But all of that again is making us like not be so focused on other people because we're focused more on ourselves. That's kind of where the individualistic thing comes in, which is very like paradoxical, right? Because you're like very ironic, because you're like you're individual, you're being very individualistic by only focusing on things you like, but then where those things are that you like is also where there are other people that like those things, and you end up being social within like specific spectrums of society, right? Again, like the video game community, the guitar community, the book club community, the fan fiction community, like whatever, like all these type of different segmentations of society are actually very social, even though they're individualistic because they're for individuals, right? So that's kind of like a weird mix right there. Um, but anyway, I think that's why we are alone. We are alone because everyone's focused on what they're doing. And even if you try to reach out to people, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to care about what you have to tell them for that long, right? And I think what you could do is freelance or subcontract or like again have those needs in different areas. Now again, the problem there, like I mentioned earlier, would be that those relationships aren't as deep, right? Again, you're not going to get that 100%, but you can probably get 40, 45, 50% of fulfillment, right? And that should be good enough to keep you going, right? Because other than that, you'll just get like super depressed and you'll be like super lonely and won't be talking to anybody and you'll be bitter and resentful, and that's, that's a way of living too, but it's pretty shitty way of living. So anyway, I thought I'd talk about that a little bit. Let me know what you think. Um, it is a sad reality. I feel for everybody because I'm kind of on the same, I'm just like everybody else. That these are the things I think, and I also detect it. I notice it in myself too. Um, but anyway, I guess we live in pretty shitty times for now, and yeah, I guess this is where we'll leave it off at, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.